In this podcast, we aim to uncover secrets, stories, and methods of those in the forefront of movement practices far and wide. From physical therapy, strength training, mobility training, CrossFit, martial arts, and much more. We want to use this platform to explore topics we love to talk about with other professionals in varying fields to do with movement. A little bit about us: we run Flow Motion Fitness as a personalized online mobility and rehabilitation coaching service. We offer an online course for coaches, as well as retreats and workshops in person. This podcast started when we began doing Instagram Lives, so the first few episodes are taken from our first lives that led us down the route of exploration in all topics related to the health and fitness of the human body that influences controlled and pain-free movement. In this episode, Chelsea and I are going to go over some of your questions for World Spine Day. Hey guys, so we are going live a little bit late today, sorry about that. We are going to be covering all of your questions on spinal mobility and pain management. We've got quite a few good ones that have just come through, and Chelsea is going to join us in just a second. Cool. Just setting up. So if you guys have any other questions, please just add them over here in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them as they pop up. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm good, yeah.
Coffee, so good.
Step in. I love that it's Spine Day, or National Spine Day. How did you find that out?
Literally Callum, because we've been doing like a spinal series this month on YouTube, and Callum was like looking things up for a post, and he was like, "Did you know it's Spinal Day today?" I was like, that's
good. Yes, it's the best holiday.
Yeah. So we got quite a few questions through. I thought I'd start off with a random little fact for everyone, that approximately 80% of Americans will end up with some kind of back problem in their lifetime. That is quite a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people think, oh, it's not going to affect me, but 80% is a big number.
Yeah, most of us will experience it at some point in our life. Yeah. And we can learn how to manage it very effectively and get out of it quite quickly with the right tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of questions. Should I go through those, or do you want to go through something first?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Did you say go through the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, questions, great. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so the first question is, why does sleeping on the floor ease back pain?
I'll give my perspective and then hear yours. Something I noticed a good bit is when a lot of people sleep on the floor, they tend to sleep flat on their back, which relatively, most of us spend a lot of time in what we call flexion of the spine, which is the rounding of the spine. But our spine can move that direction. It can arch, it can twist, it can bend sideways. We have all these different movements that it can do. And when we use all those movements in a nice balance, we tend to feel pretty good. But if we go really far into one direction, like flexion, without getting the opposite, which is extension or arching, we can have some pain. So I think for a lot of people, when they sleep on the floor, they're actually putting their spine into a little bit of extension, and their spine's like, thank you. Yeah. I needed this, and can be quite relieving for some people. Yeah. What do you notice?
Okay, so yeah, I agree with the same thing. I had a lot of people mention that they actually do feel a lot more relief when they're on the floor. Mm-hmm. I'm curious whether these people are mentioning, so the person that put the question through, I don't know if they're using a pillow or not, but also getting rid of a pillow eventually does happen, because obviously being like this all the time is not how it's supposed to be. And one like little analogy I like thinking of when it comes to like the positioning of the body, for example, to think of your body like clay, because often we think about like the skeleton being like brick by brick, pressure on top of pressure sort of thing. But we're not really made of brick, we're more like clay. Yeah. So when our body is in like a chair for a long time, we do start molding into that position. Our muscles start getting used to that position. It's pretty tight in certain areas and aggressive in others. And like if you've ever watched like a truck driver who's in his 50s get out of the truck to at a truck stop, you realize they look like they're in a seated position while they're walking.
Right. Yeah.
They've been doing this so much. So if you think about like the bed, it's soft. You've got a pillow. And after a while, well, we also have this like forward head tilt thing going on.
Right.
So we're like looking at the phones, looking at the laptop, our heads are going forward, and then we're propping our head up with a pillow and everything's soft and we're not quite flat. Like we should be capable of sleeping on a floor. And if you find that uncomfortable, it just means that your body has got so used to other things.
Right.
Yeah.
I read an interesting study the other day. So one thing I'll talk with my clients about, and you touched on it too, is if they're having some pain with sleeping, sort of watching what position their neck's in, because a lot of us tend to sleep, if it feels nice, right? We kind of like send our head forward. And there was some research about neck or the shoulder pain stemming from the spine, and touching on the spine as it relates up into the neck. They found that people with shoulder pain, a really little simple test that people can do is just sort of squeeze the shoulder on the side that feels non-painful. Squeeze the shoulder that feels painful. And if squeezing it itself is bringing on a lot of that uncomfortable sensation, it's a really good indicator. It's like in the 90s percentile that it's actually stemming from the neck.
Wow.
So those type of people would really, really do well eventually with some guidance, sleeping on their back completely flat without any sort of pillow, or watching sort of that head forward position when they're sleeping.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's really interesting, that study.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's like a quick little super easy test people can do.
Like most of the time when you have people with like shoulder impingement, chances are they've got some serious thoracic and cervical things going on as well. And it's not just shoulder, obviously. What else was I going to say? I was going to cover something else there quickly. Oh yeah, I just remembered actually. So I spoke to someone the other day who is suffering with herniated disc pain. And in the beginning, like the recommendations are very, very basic and slow. But because of the pain, it causes you, because you can't sit down, you can't really stand up, you end up lying down. And I remember this is something, so I lay down a lot when I first had my second car accident. I couldn't really stand up and sit. But the problem with that is, you still want to work, you still want to do something, so you end up propping your head up. So I did this for months. Where I was laying in bed with my head propped up like this, and everything here started following suit.
Yeah. That
can be an easy trap to fall into when you first had some kind of injury and you are in so much pain you don't want to move. You lay down, and most of all, laying down is 100% the opposite of what we should be doing, but sometimes you kind of have to do, and you end up with more side effects by bringing your head forward.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's something I'll hear also, and you may see this too, is if someone's having disc-related symptoms or nerve-related symptoms, sleeping with a lot of pillows underneath the knees can provide them some relief too. It's the same thing, temporarily helpful. If you're sleeping more, fantastic. And then it can start to contribute to that hip being off in some ways that can actually sort of perpetuate things down the road. So yeah, it's a good point to check in on those things and whether or not you're doing them long term.
Yeah, exactly. Like a little
question.
Should we
sorry.
These questions and try
out
ones before we answer the other one?
What do you recommend for pain in the lower back, left and right?
Over my butt. That's what it says. So, very, very low back and top of the glute area. That could be a few things. It could actually just be the muscles of the QL and piriformis being tight, and it might not actually necessarily be like spine related, it could be muscular. Quite often piriformis syndrome can kind of end up doing things like that as well. What is your take on it?
Yeah, sometimes lower back and right over my butt. Sometimes there are little trigger points essentially that can form. We think of our glute as being like our butt muscle, but as you know, our glutes actually go really high into the sides of our torso essentially. And so for some people, if they're having some knots or some tension or some tightness through the glute muscles themselves, that can cause this type of pain pattern. So there's some soft tissue work that can be done, and then sort of on the problem solving side of that, like what tends to cause that type of thing. something I find to be really helpful for that type of pain is learning how to incorporate lateral training into someone's program, because oftentimes it's, like you mentioned, QL, piriformis, glutes, they're tensing up for some sort of reason. Granted, it could be stress or something, or just a training spike or something like that, but oftentimes it's learning how to add in some variables into your training that aren't most commonly taught. So doing things like side plank variations, eventually with the right guidance, can help on the preventative side of that.
Yeah, and I have noticed a few things that are kind of triggers like this. So a bunch of my clients who sit down a lot and do a lot of cycling, they are the ones that typically report this kind of pain. So the question is, are you doing too much in a seated position? So that could be, are you cycling too much in a seated position? Are you sitting too much in a seated position? Just in that position too much in hip flexion, and is that causing everything to tighten up? Does that be a massive factor?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to shut my window outside really quickly. They just started doing yard work, naturally, neighbors.
I'm just going to other. Hi, old rib injury, E78 area. Tightness due to training, sharp back spasms. 1, have you heard of other similar cases? 2, suggestions for back spasm prevention.
Ooh, I love this question.
Yeah, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I experienced rib pain for years and was misdiagnosed multiple times. So I really love helping people with this, because a lot of people get misdiagnosed and they don't get full comprehensive care. So it was old rib injury, sharp back spasms. So we think of our ribs as being, like here, right? Like kind of think of our ribs as, like starting the front, they wrap all the way in the back. So you want to think of them like a really big barrel. And the other really important thing about the ribs is they attach to our thoracic spine. Like they come in, thoracic spine and ribs are buds, and what one does, the other one impacts as well. And I guess the third thing is a lot of shoulder muscles impact in with the ribs. So your pec muscle, especially some of your scapular muscles. So oftentimes, if I've seen someone that's had a rib injury and then tried some treatments and weren't successful, it's because they just focused on the rib itself. You need to look at the rib, the thoracic spine, and the shoulder and get them all moving really well together for someone to get back to feeling 100%. It can definitely, kind of a common pattern is it, for some people, it maybe starts in the front or starts in the side and then it starts migrating into the mid-back. It can cause spasms like this person's describing. So yes, general things that I would start with are thoracic and shoulder mobility. Is typically that the rib's getting a little bit over mobile because it's trying to do the job of thoracic. So I focus on thoracic and shoulder, get that moving really well, and then the rib tends to calm down naturally. So yeah.
Interesting injury and stories with things like people actually getting things like sticks in their ribs and having that taken out, and then that affected their rib pain, thoracic pain for years after that because of scar tissue. But what does work is increasing the range of motion of not just your lateral flexion spine, but your thoracic extension. And one thing with this is it does take time. Like, there's a lot of things that can be quite quick, but I think it does take like a year or so to actually consistently work on it before it starts to diminish, because you're looking at an area usually if something, say it is a specific rib area, that is not like you're not mobile. Obviously your thoracic is, but if you've got scar tissue there, it takes a little while.
Sure. Yeah, and sometimes I think I see some people that are, take 6 months and can take longer. And then I see some people that respond really, really quickly to it. Like if it's, they just hadn't received the right treatment before. In fact, I've had a lot of clients that get diagnosed with costochondritis, and the treatment is a lot of soft tissue work, but no movement included in your treatment plan at all. And then as we know, movement is. That
actually relates to one of the questions I got just a little while ago. So like you said, so someone asked, why do I always feel better after rolling?
after rolling.
Oh, it's soft tissue work. So
Yeah.
basically, the reason you feel good for a temporary amount of time is because it gives you a temporary window of length that's not permanent. So you will have relief, you will have a little extra length to work with. But that means you have that little window to work with it. It doesn't mean it's going to stay forever. So if you just roll and then you leave it, nothing will change whatsoever. And then that's why, like you said, soft tissue work, if someone gives soft tissue work and nothing else, that is a problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I think the window of opportunity is what I've always heard it called. And it's dry needling, adjustment, soft tissue work, foam rolling, it all falls in that category. And some people get a really long window. Some people get 24 hours, which is amazing. Some people get a 30-minute window. It just sort of depends on your nervous system. But yeah, it just gives you an opportunity to do things different and move in a different way. And then our job is to help you capitalize on it so that those changes stick. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, Kelly really popularized the idea of rolling and releasing. And then that kind of got a lot of a bad rep because people kind of misunderstanding it. They were kind of releasing and then going into CrossFit workout.
Yeah, right.
Like, okay, that's one of the things you don't want to be doing. You don't want to release anything and then go into a race or try your maximum effort. That's one thing to just avoid. You've got that opportunity to create some stability and strength in that length. It doesn't necessarily mean push yourself now time.
Right.
You don't want to be releasing before any kind of big event.
Totally, yeah. Just any sort of stretching, like intense stretching before you really ask a big demand of your body.
Oh, we got some feedback. Sorry, I've been like rolling the wrong way. So it says, yes, exactly how I experience this pain migrates front to back. I've seen a few specialists and the most I felt someone understands my pain. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very welcome.
You are so welcome to reach out with questions because I've been through that before.
It's always helpful when your therapist has been through something before because nothing is quite the same as someone going through it themselves. Like study it, read about it, but when you've been through something, that's really a whole nother level of understanding.
Yes.
This one's not back related, but anyway, it says, I have tendinitis. Any advice?
And it says bicep tendinitis? Is that what it says?
It says bicep tendinitis.
Bicep tendinitis. Oh, yeah. Plenty of advice.
Well, first thing about bicep tendinitis is, unfortunately, you will have to rest a little bit. It's quite annoying, but also look into your joint function. So see if maybe that happened overuse for a reason. Sometimes bicep tendinitis can literally be like caused by a single event. You overdid something and then everything's like inflamed, but do check out your shoulder mobility and your thoracic mobility, spinal mobility, because there could be a reason why that popped up. If there's any more information or background information as to like when you got injured, how you got injured, and how it affects you in movement now, I could probably give you a bit of advice, but it's not a good that you can just give a general bit of advice for, but generally speaking, there will be a period of time you probably want to work on mobility and lay the strength work for a while. That's my advice.
Sure, yeah. What I would say, something I look into a lot when anyone's having any sort of bicep related pain is I tend to see this a lot when someone's gone really pull dominant with their workouts. So I think a quick little breakdown of, this will explain it a little bit. There are exercises where you push, push-ups, planks, things like this. There are exercises where you pull, rows, pull-ups, those sorts of things. Pushing exercises tend to work the tricep a lot. Pulling exercises tend to work the bicep a lot. So this is something I see a lot after someone's done like a pull-up challenge or something where pulling is getting ramped up really quickly. And so one thing that I'll add that I don't tend to see people getting this advice as much with like traditional physio is eventually something that would be really helpful if that's what's going on with them is having someone that can sit down and look at the workouts that you're doing with you to help. You can either customize those, or you can learn ways in the future to change that up so you're less likely to deal with this type of issue. And it can be a way that people continue to be active, even if that tendonitis is limiting other things like pull-ups and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Definitely sort of a background is how it happened, and what you're doing now would be a good idea. Like one thing that not that many people talk about, I suppose, is are you doing a full amount of pull? Because like you said,
Yeah,
pull dominated. But yeah, if we get more information about that, and we can go deeper into that topic. Shall I go over the other questions? Because there's still quite a few.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So the next one, do I stretch every morning or with a couple of days pause if I am a beginner?
Stretch every morning, or with, what was the other part?
So do I stretch every morning, or do I give myself a couple of days pause if I'm a beginner? I'm assuming this is related to back specifically, because that's what the story is, but I don't know.
Okay. So we'll assume it's back pain?
Yeah, I'm going to assume it's back.
Okay. Do I stretch every morning? Well,
it depends.
Yes. I guess I'll offer a couple things and then to hear what you say. So I think the first myth that I'll debunk is that you don't have to stretch a lot every day to feel good and to be pain-free. Some people find stretching feels good to them. If that's the case, great, but you don't have to do it. You can learn how to increase your mobility and your flexibility with the training that you're doing. As far as, do I need to do things every day? I do think, and everybody treats a little bit differently, but when we're working with pain, we're working with a nervous system, right? And muscles and all these things. But when we have pain, it is helpful to find movements that you do frequently that help your pain. And having a lot of frequency with that can be helpful, but it doesn't have to be this really long, like 30-minute stretch session. Maybe it's 5 minutes a day in the morning that you spend kind of getting your joints moving the way they want to, and then go on with your day.
Exactly.
What about you?
Yeah, so, I mean, do I stretch every morning or every couple of days pause? I mean, again, stretching is not like my idea of rehab. So I wouldn't be doing flexibility work to fix a pain. But if you are, say, trying to get more mobile back, then moving it daily is fine. It depends what you're doing. If you are specifically stretching it and you're going into extreme stretches, then, you know, as a beginner, maybe not so much. Maybe just start on trying to get good spinal movement. So it would help to have a professional assess your spine, see if, or rather how far away you are from the ideal range of motion of each segment of your spine. And then you can know what you should be focused on improving. Either way, you'll still be, you know, you'll be touching upon every movement, but at least you can, you know, pay particular attention and watch your progress with perhaps the areas that didn't test so well. Like, for example, a common one that so well is spinal extension. You tend to have very limited thoracic extension because of the amount that we are in, you know, flexion. So as an example, that would be one to watch. Yeah, but as usual. So actually, a little story is like the other day I spoke to a lady who was given a few exercises for her knee to disc pain, and I was a little surprised when I heard about it because she was told to do glutes and spinal extension laying on the floor. So put, you know, chest up and all that stuff. However, she tested very, very poorly for hip extension. So, and this is common. It's the first time I've seen this. This is actually maybe the third or fourth time I've seen this in the last year. Someone's been told to do exercises that require full range of motion of the hip in extension, and they've been given exercises that are affected by extension, for example, glute bridges and spinal extension. So what that means is when they go into a glute bridge, the hips can't go all the way into extension, therefore they are going to compensate the lower back. Same thing with the spinal extension, they're going to compensate with the lower back. So what happens if you are, say, having a rehab program, and you've been given all these exercises that in theory at some point will be beneficial, and you haven't tested your hip function, that is a massive sort of, what do you call it, like a blind spot in a way. Like, you need to know how your hips are functioning before you go ahead and do any kind of spinal rehab work. So ideally get your whole body joint range of motion tested, but make sure at least, at the very least, you get your hip joint range of motion tested when you're doing spinal rehab.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people have had the experience of, like, they try going to rehab, they're given this list of exercises, like it doesn't feel customized to them at all. They're just sort of put in a corner, no one's asking them for feedback. And yeah, it's like you said, like, you want direct feedback on exactly what you should be doing, custom to you, custom to your body.
Yeah.
Otherwise it might help, but it tends not to be as effective.
Do the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember this back when I was getting my first bout of rehab over a decade ago. And some of the exercises made me lose feeling in my leg. And I was like, is this normal? And they were like, no, it's not. And I was like, okay, should I continue? They're like, yeah, it will eventually help. But of course it didn't, because I didn't have my joints tested. So it is a big deal, to be honest. And I think this really does need to spread, because people are essentially doing more harm than good by trying their best every day, committing to the program, but then any better. But I think it's really important, and that there needs to be awareness that your spine is not sitting there on its own. It's connected to a lot of other things like scapula, shoulders, neck, ankles.
Right.
A lot of. I've got another question. We've had this question before. It is, I get a pop in my back when I round it. It hurts after extension. Is that bad?
I get a pop after I round and it hurts after extension.
So I don't know if I read that wrong. It was written like that, but the pop happens when you do this, and then when you extend, you have back pain. Assuming that's what it was. If you are watching now live, please correct.
Give some comments. Yeah. So what that tells me is, like, it's always with back pain, there could be so many different answers, right? But what that tells me is that for a reason, going between flexion and extension, the body's having a hard time controlling that smoothly. So there's pain one way, there's some popping the other way. So what I would want to look into is, all joints sort of have like a muscle sandwich. That's how I describe it sometimes. Like, there's muscles on one side that do this one thing, and there's muscles on this other side that do this other thing, and they work opposite of each other. So we have the spinal extensors, or like the long muscles that run up and down the spine, and then we have the abdominals, and those two work together to control, in certain areas of the spine, the curling and the extension. So I would look into how they're controlling that movement. And, it could be that they've never been taught how to control it. It could be that there's some pain in that's thrown the motor control off. It could be that they've been told not to do it, and that has thrown off the patterning as well. Yeah.
Point.
And the other thing I would look into, if it's lower back, which I'm going to kind of guess it is how their hip is moving too. Because a lot of time the hip muscles, the psoas, can get involved, and they throw that whole flexion extension pattern off. When really we think of our hip flexors as being in our hips, but they can tug on the spine in certain ways and make that rounding, arching more challenging.
Yeah. Also, pop, if it's like a pain-free pop, it's not too unusual. Like, people do get pops in all places, that's not a problem. But if after extension you do get pain in your back, definitely do your hip range of motion and other muscles that may be compensating there, because that shouldn't be happening. And I would advise to stop doing back extension exercises that are causing that pain until you can have a little look at what could be compensating, and then you can start working on it straight away. There's no reason to be afraid of back extension, but whatever's causing that pain, don't force it, and try to find what is causing a compensation in that. Yeah. Still have more questions.
Let's hear them. This is fun.
Next one. I have disc degeneration. It's not terrible, but hurts from time to time. What can I do? my advice,
Yeah.
as get a joint assessment. It's like all the time.
Yeah.
It's important. Like, if, for example, you aren't really in pain that much, but occasionally it pops up, that's even, you know, like more of a reason to look into that, because something must be causing that pain. It's not there from time to time for no reason. So definitely get your joints assessed, see where you have limitations and start working on those. And gradually that should start improving.
Yeah, I would say disc degeneration, that diagnosis is always tricky, right? Because we start getting it starts popping up on x-rays when we're in our 20s.
Yeah.
And so the bit of encouragement I would give is that if that's been seen on your x-ray and MRI, doesn't mean that you're doomed to have pain. People can have that and be pain-free. So in order to get there, you want to get a joint assessment. But I would, you know, some good general things to start looking at is hip mobility and thoracic mobility. How do we get those other things around the low back moving really well so that low back doesn't have to work so hard and it is less susceptible to having pain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's actually a few things that I don't know whether we're going to have time for. So I kind of want to put it out there, see if people are interested and if they want to comment on it and see what you think as well. So there's actually something I saw this morning that I get like information from the Harvard Medical Journal. And it was something about joints that kind of rattled my cage a little bit.
I love it. Let's hear it.
So I kind of want to send you the screenshot of the email I got, but there was a bunch of things in advice on how to protect your joints. And I agree with most of it.
Let's dive in.
I can't remember all of it. I'll need to send you the screenshot, but I was thinking maybe we could do a live on how to protect your joints for real and the common myths that are being spread quite often by universities. Because let's face it, the studies that happen are very limited in their selection. So they will test a very specific thing without a huge, like, sometimes they just pick a certain type of person and they pick a certain type of activity and they don't tell you anything else. They don't tell you whether they have tips, whether they have a good diet, whether they move in other ways. So therefore, I feel like a lot of the studies coming out can sometimes give you fantastic conclusions and fantastic information. And the other ones quite often say, well, we didn't get really that fantastic results. We'll need to investigate further. But yet they do come up with a conclusion which is ever so slightly wrong. So, for example, one of the things I remember was try to pick low impact activities and do not lift weights.
Do not lift weights? That's what it said?
Weights. It also said do not pick any exercise that is high intensity.
No!
Harvard Medical School.
Harvard!
So I was like, I can't even.
Oh my God, let's do it. We gotta do it.
Yeah?
We gotta do it. Yeah, we gotta do it.
Live on this, because it's a big one. Like, it's not like we could just cover it now, but
no.
So many things. I was like, oh, I need to comment on this. I can't just. People are going to be reading it going, well, Harvard said it. So
yes.
Yeah. It's not that true.
Oh my God. And it's like you said, a lot of times these studies, they don't follow people long-term either. So like, for example, we just go live on this, like the meniscus surgery recommendations are changing like wild, but in practicality, the same amount of people are being told they need meniscus surgery. But as you know, now they're finding, long-term, there's all this stuff that we didn't know, you know? So it's like, oh yeah.
As we know, sometimes a fantastic study comes out, but it's just one study in like thousands, and then it takes like another decade for that to come into practice. So some of the studies we've read that have come out recently, what does it say?
It says by that I would be dead already. Martial arts training is always very intense. We love your martial arts training.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
Basically, by the time like a really good piece of information or like a good study has actually come into practice and people start using it, it takes a long time, like a really long time. And like the amount of people I've met with like Osgood-Schlatters or knee pain for 40 years of their life. And their physio said, well, actually, according to this, you need to do leg extensions, and that's it. And this person was never assessed for joint function. They were never assessed for any kind of functional. And then after just 3 months of doing functional movements and getting the joints working properly, the 40-year-old pain stops. And it's because we're doing a leg extension. It's actually the opposite. And leg extensions, quite often, if you have overactive hip flexors, it's going to make you worse.
Yeah. I know, it's like, it's one of the go-tos, I think, for knee pain, and I forget because I'm so far removed from it. I'm healthy so far, I will not listen to these people.
Yes.
You brought up a point. What was I going to say?
Oh, it's just upsetting when you read things like that from like reputable schools, and you just
what are they even basing that off of? Like,
I think what I'll do is I'll send you the screenshot, and then we can make a whole new debunking live.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. That would be really fun. Just like pick different things and going on it. Okay.
And I don't know if we'll have time for all of this as well today, but we wanted to cover how to assess a spine and the top 3 exercises that you can do on a regular basis to move your spine. But we could probably save that.
Yeah, I think that's a whole live in itself too.
Yeah, that's a long topic. So I feel like we should do another one on this. But do you guys have any questions? And are any of you desperate to know any of the spinal assessments? Because we could do a few, but I feel like we should do a long topic on that one, really, because
sounds good.
Yeah, we've been going again.
Yeah, if anyone listening has a topic that you would really love to learn about, we'd love to know. So just type it in there.
Cool. So we've got 2 more lives in the making. Basically, how to assess your spine and exercises for your spine. So that's one live. And then the other one is let's debunk Harvard Medical Journal.
That's great. This is going to be so fun.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to it.
Great. Okay. Fun as usual. And thank you guys for joining and asking some good questions. And you know where to find us. You can DM to, what is this? That is why I never listen to her. Yeah, there's some very conflicting stuff going out. So yeah. That's why you need to look into even more things when you get told something by one specific institution. Yeah. Cool. So if any of you found this useful, go and follow Chelsea. I will tag her when I put this up on Instagram. And yeah, we also, somewhere on my website, there is a free webinar on what is mobility coaching. So that might be helpful for you guys who are coaches. And apart from that, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for coming.
Cool. All right, we'll speak soon, and yeah, have a nice day, everyone.
Okay, bye.